Hello, everyone. My name is Jared James Nichols. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on this fabulous Tuesday evening, the day after my birthday. What a great way to spend the day after your birthday. I want to thank Long & McQuaid for having me. This is awesome. I'm here to talk about my tone, my technique, gear, any questions that anyone has throughout the live stream. Shoot them over. I'll answer whatever you guys want to know. I just want to talk guitar, have fun, show you some cool stuff. I have a ton of things that have been happening and are happening. Tours coming up, although unfortunately not in Canada, but tours coming up, new music out, new gear out, a bunch of stuff. So without further ado, I just want to have some fun and talk about some stuff. So first things first, starting off with a little jam. I'm doing something different tonight, something that I've never actually done before. So I took my Blackstar JJN 20 head, which is the head version, not the combo, that came out in 2019, and I'm plugging it straight in to my Focusrite, my Scarlett, into the computer. So I hope it sounds cool. This is, like I said, first time I've done it, and I think it sounds pretty good in the room, but kind of a interesting new thing. If anyone knows me, they know that I'm very, how do I say this? Archaic, not in a way of being dumb about it, but I'm so used to playing straight into an amp, miking it up. But this is pretty cool. I think I'm going to start doing this and using this for demos. It's a really, really cool kind of, it's a different vibe, a different tone, but I think it sounds good. And of course, here we are. I'm playing, yes, you know it and you love it, Gold Glory, my signature Epiphone. This came out last year. I'm trying to remember. Time has kind of been a weird thing. So yeah, this came out last year, and I brought as well. We can plug this in. Let's grab her over here. Hold on. Bear with me. I have Old Glory. This was the prototype that Epiphone had sent me, so we can talk about this too. I got a bunch of guitars in this room. I'm actually in my guitar room at my house, so I have a ton of different stuff we can plug in and mess around with. But as of now, what you just heard is Gold Glory. Signature Epiphone Les Paul Custom. Single P90, Seymour Duncan, USA. Modeled after their Antiquity pickup, which I love. Simple Les Paul. If you guys haven't checked these out, go to Long & McQuaid. Talk to your friendly Long & McQuaid. Get one of these babies in your hands. It's such a cool guitar, and I'm so proud of it because, like the first one, Old Glory, Gold Glory, it's such a simple instrument. One pickup, two knobs, a volume, and a tone. So the more you kind of get into it with this guitar, the more you kind of discover different tones, different kind of vibe. And the best part about it is everyone that plays it, they're going to sound completely like themselves. So I've had people that, you know, are more into country stuff. They can get a cool twang out of it. If you want to play heavy stuff on it, if you want to detune it, if you want to put a capo on it and just play chords, you can basically do anything with this thing. It's so versatile. Okay, we got some questions coming in. Make sure to send over your questions. So first one, Jared, Dr. Train is asking, do I have a signature Gibson coming out in the future? Any hints? Well, yes, absolutely. I can't tell you all the things, but yes, there's going to be a ton of stuff coming out. We have a really, really big surprise happening coming up this year still that I can't wait to unveil. It's going to be something very special. And I'm so lucky because as a player, I have all these beautiful guitars to play, but this relationship with Gibson and with Epiphone has been amazing. And it's allowed me to kind of, you know, explore different possibilities. So, Dr. Train, to answer your question, yes. The guitar, the hints I have is it will be shaped like this. It'll have P90 pickups or pickup. I don't know if that was a Freudian slip, but it'll have pickups, and you're going to have to wait for the rest. I promise it'll be something really cool. Yes, it's a very cool relationship that I'm super stoked to have. And yeah, stay tuned. Okay, Chevy Rickard is asking, what's my favorite pedal? That's a good question. So pedals with me are, it's almost like a love-hate relationship, because growing up, I really was just tuned into a guitar, a cable, straight into the amp, right? There's so many things, and I really want to get into my technique a lot and talk about different stuff, but there's so many things that you can accomplish just by using your guitar, the volume, the tone knobs going into your amp, right? Where you set them, a lot of people, when they play, they think, okay, cool, my guitar, basically it's 0 or 10, right? So off or completely on. So all the way on. But there's so much things. There's a whole world in between there, You can bring it up a little more. You can mess around with the tone knob. You take the tone knob all the way off, right? It gives you more of that Clapton thing, that. Or you can kind of put it in the middle. And with this guitar, what's great about putting it in the middle is you kind of get that quasi neck pickup tone, right? So you can get a little bit more of that, kind of adds a little bit more bass, cuts down the treble a little bit, kind of goes. What I really like to do too is I like to basically put it as I'm playing a phrase. Let's say I start off with the tone and the volume at 10. Then maybe I'll slip the volume down. Maybe I'll slip the tone down. There's a whole possibilities without even getting into pedals yet. This is the most long-winded answer ever. So I was so used to that. And then once I started to kind of get into pedals, I realized there's such a sonic world. So right now, actually, I'm plugged into one of the new Maestro pedals. I don't know if anyone's tried the new Maestro line. Gibson hooked me up, and they sent me a whole package of them, and I love them. I'm not going to move the computer because I might screw up this whole operation, but next to me I have right now it's the Ranger Overdrive on. It sounds awesome. I'm running clean through this amp, straight into this Ranger Overdrive, into the Focusrite, and it has such a cool kind of, it's not too overbearing. I like pedals that, a lot of players would say, oh, I like always on pedals, or I like pedals that I can put on and then I can use them in the rig. And with me, I'm either one or the other. It's like, I want a pedal that's going to be a freak out, where it's like, if I hit this pedal, I know it's going to be crazy. Like on my new record, or my new EP, Shadow Dancer, I didn't use a ton of effects. I used my favorites, which are, I have a Klon, right? Yes. Watch your feet, name dropping. I have a Klon, a Tube Screamer, just very stuff I've used since the beginning. But once I started to mess around with different stuff, like a fuzz face, anything that has like a different kind of tonality to it, it's kind of cool because it'll make you play different. So if I had to say my favorite pedals, they would be overdrives, Klons, Tube Screamers. But I have to admit, this Maestro pedal, there's something about it that I just really like. And maybe it has to deal with the fact that I play with my fingers. Maybe it's something to deal with, it's a little more touch sensitive. Whatever it is, I really get along with it. I recently was in a big wah-wah phase. I have a RMC wah that I really love. And here's something new too I want to try out. I'm getting ready to get back out on the road. I'm going on tour with Zach Wild, supporting Zach Wild with Nita Strauss. And unfortunately not in Canada, but I wanted to get into, because being in the studio, I used a lot of tape echo. So I've been trying to think, if anyone has any good suggestions, I want to get a tape echo going. I'm thinking maybe a Strymon, maybe something along those lines. So if you have any good suggestions, please put them down so I can check them out. But yeah, I'm simple when it comes to pedals. You know, different kinds of cool distortions, overdrives, you know, fuzzes. I'm pretty simple like that. But like now, basically I'm just leaving it on and just kind of playing, you know. So it's so it sounds cool. All right, we got a few more questions. Here we go. Snuffy 166. Are you looking forward to the Black Label Society tour? I cannot wait. Tour kicks off, I believe, April 29th, and it goes until May 21st across America, and I'm super excited. I have not been on tour in a while. Most of that being because obviously things going on in the world, but the last time I was on tour, I broke my arm, and I'm happy to say it's better. It's all good. I'm healed up. I'm ready to get back out on the road. I'm so looking forward to the tour. Zach is one of my best friends, of course, a guitar idol. I love Zach. I love his band. I just can't wait to get back out on the road and, you know, just start playing loud rock and roll again. This is going to be a fun tour. We got a lot of shows, just a ton of different stuff. So, yes, very much looking forward to that. All right, I'm going to answer a few more questions, then go off in a spiel. Here we go. We have Milos is saying, hey, Jared, loving the ArtistWorks course. Quick questions. What settings do you do on your amp to get a good tone? No one ever talks about amp settings. That's a great question. First off, that's a whole nother topic. Thanks for mentioning it. I wanted to say, if you guys want to dig in further, I do have a course on ArtistWorks, which is the host of many different online kind of personalities for instruction. Paul Gilbert, Guthrie Trapp. It's a really, really great program. Basically, they asked me to start from the beginning of where I started playing to where I am now. And we filmed, probably 150 lessons about, I'm talking from the open strings to the most intricate licks I know. So if you're really, you know, interested in taking your guitar playing to a different place, maybe trying to grow or trying to just add a little bit of different flavor in, the course is great. That's ArtistWorks. And I mean, it's pretty extensive. So even if you're a beginner or you're an intermediate or someone that's already totally shredding, there's going to be some cool stuff for you to check out. So Milos, I'm glad that you're loving the ArtistWorks course. And when it comes to amp settings, first things first, make sure you use your ear, because a lot of players tend to read about something, or they hear, you know, this is where it should be set, or, oh, I've heard that only Marshalls are supposed to be run at this, or, oh, my clean tone, I need to have the presence all the way up or all the way up. Just use your ear, because you're going to be the one that knows how things are supposed to be set up. So for me, what I always go for is, and we're going to get into this, I have a million things to talk about and I talk a lot, but I play with my fingers. So there's this whole situation that I have compared to players that play with a pick. And really, the only reason I don't play with a pick is because I'm a lefty. So when I started to play the guitar, I'll keep it a long-winded story short, I couldn't get along with holding a guitar pick. It would just like fly out of my hands. It never felt right. But when I had my fingers against the strings, there was a connection. It was almost this vocal connection. And growing up, you know, listening to all this blues and all these great rock players, there's something about the way you attack the guitar that really, really defines your tone. We'll go into that in a minute. But when it comes to how I want my amp set up, first off, think about what your intent and your purpose is. Think about, what sound am I trying to get? It's not like you have to dial it in like, oh, I'm thinking, you know, rolling off the high mids. Don't get like that. Get a vibe in your head. Get you could think it could be one of your favorite songs, your favorite solos. I used to do that all the time. I would like tone check. So the songs I would always tone check with were like Mississippi Queen. You know, I would play the riff, you know, I'd figure out what I needed to get. Oh, maybe I need a little more mids. Maybe there's way too much bass. So I would tone check with songs. Like, you could literally put it on, sit there with your amp, and wait to try and figure out how to dial it in. But since I don't play with a pick, something that I notice is I'm putting a lot less bass and a lot more mids and a lot more treble when I dial in my amp. Simply put, that's a pretty big pick, my thumb, right? My index finger, my middle finger, these are pretty big picks, and I'm using a lot of force when I'm picking. So if I'm hitting down with this thumb, and I'm really... I'm snapping up with my index, you know, you're getting a... That's a lot of force. And, you know, if you're using a pick, you're going to be getting a lot of that high end from that pick. So I choose to dig in a little deeper to get that sound. I would search for your favorite tones. Do yourself a favor and write down your 5 favorite guitar tones, like what you love about them. And don't think only solos. Think riffs, rhythm, think overall vibe. And really think to yourself, how can I incorporate all of this and mix it up and to get my tone? So the things that you got to think about too, and why I love P90s, when you think about the actual guitar, this is something I learned by playing in bands and figuring it out, you know, in real time. When I would play a Stratocaster, I had this thing where like I'd be playing it alone and it would sound great. And I'd be like, okay, cool. You know, I was probably 15, 16 years old. And then I would pick up a Les Paul and then I would go, oh my goodness, the Strat sounds this big. And then when I played a Les Paul with my thumb, it sounded this big. And it was basically like the Strat wasn't enough. The Les Paul almost felt too much. And then I started to go, how can I figure this out? And that's when I kind of stumbled on, man, if I get a Les Paul I love the feel of, and I get a P90, a single coil pickup, that obviously isn't the same as a Stratocaster or a Fingerstyle, but it has that quality. It has more of that hollow, kind of glassy tone. Maybe that would give me what I'm looking for. Then I was able to start to say, okay, if I love the sound of this guitar, now let me start to match it up with different amps. And that was a really cool thing because, you know, once you find the guitar and the vocal quality of it that you like, matching it up with an amp, that's the fun part. So what I would suggest for you, write down your favorite tones, think about what you love about guitar tone, what gets you excited, and then search for that. A lot of times I find that it's in the way that you play. Even if you pick up a guitar, not even plugged in, and you're just messing around on it, there's a certain tone and a certain vibe that you're going to have. It's going to be unique to you. So the more you hone in on that, it's almost like your favorite flavors. And then you start to match the gear around it. That's when magic starts to happen. So good question. I'm glad you're loving the ArtistWorks course. And honestly, start sending me some VEs over there. That's something cool about ArtistWorks. If anyone's interested, you can send me a video and say, hey, Jared, check this out. I'm working on this. And I can send you one back. It's a really cool program. So check that out if anyone's interested. All right. I was going to say now, I was going to jam a little bit and talk a little bit more about technique because as you notice, once I start talking, I don't stop. But I promised to say a few other things that are happening. So we're all guitar lovers. I released some music last Friday, right? It's a song, Threw Me to the Wolves, featuring Joe Bonamassa. Yes, the Joe Bonamassa. It was such a cool experience cutting that with him in Nashville, Tennessee here. And another version of it with a female vocalist here from Nashville named Maggie Rose, who's also so awesome. But I wanted to say if anyone wanted to take a listen to that, it's great. I was going to talk about my solo and my approach because I felt like that would be an easy way to kind of, you know, talk about some things that hold near and dear in my heart for guitar. But if you want to hear a blazing Joe Bonamassa solo over this track, it is undeniably cool. And the best part is it's over the chords, like the stairway chords, like the F, G, A minor. Joe burns it up. It's a really, really cool rendition. So Threw Me to the Wolves, it's out. Go check it out. Wherever you listen to music, it's streaming everywhere. But I wanted to take the time and basically talk about technique, tone, base it around that solo, around the vibe of that song. So let's do that. And if you have more questions, bring them in. We're going to talk about gear, anything you want to talk about. But Moving on, talking about some techniques that I really love is the percussive flair of playing guitar. So the riff of that song, right? And anyone has any questions about anything I'm talking about, throw it in there too. But the riff of this song, it has this really cool flair to it. It goes like this. You can hear I'm pulling up on this thing. It's a lot of snapping of the strings. I found that with playing guitar over the years, something that I would like to tell you guys that I think is really cool. I've always been like the single guitar player in the band. Sometimes it's hard to know how to fill up space. Now, regardless if you play with a pick or your fingers, something really cool that I like to do is basically drone notes, basically playing inside of a chord. So right here, for instance, all that I'm doing on this song for the main riff is I have an A minor chord, right? And I'm playing around that, starting off with playing in that A minor position, that first position. But basically, I'm just playing around that A minor chord. The band joins in. It's all cool, right? And I'm building this song up using that fingerstyle technique. Now, some of you might be saying, Jared, I don't play fingerstyle. I don't want to play fingerstyle. I play with a pick. Think about maybe even hybrid picking, because there's a lot of cool things that happen when you start to add more than one note. I remember I was playing with a pick. A big piece of my technique was trying to figure out how to make more sound. Not only be louder, of course, as a guitar player, you always want to be louder, but actually make more sound. Something that I figured out before I completely dropped the pick was doing basically a hybrid where it was a pick and maybe my middle finger or my ring finger, or maybe both. But try this. This is a really cool technique. If you are playing an A minor pentatonic, right? Let's run it down. So we're starting on the 5th fret, right? 5, 8 with my pinky, 5, 7 on the A, 5, 7 on the D, 5, 7 on the G, 5, 8 on the B, 5 and 8 on the high E, back down, right? Easy enough. Check this out. What if now every note that you hit off of the low E string, you were playing that low A note with it? Now, obviously, we can't play two notes on the same string yet. I'm not that good yet. But if I hold my thumb on this low A, right, and I play that A minor pentatonic, something really cool happens. Check this out. I'll alternate. You guys hearing that? Kind of cool, right? It's kind of a cool technique that you can use basically to fill up space. Now, the magic comes with how you use it. So if I just start riffing around in that A minor pentatonic and I go, starts to sound like ZZ Top, right? There's a really cool. It's kind of a cool little situation that you can get into where you start to basically play the bass along with an accompanying lead. So you can start to move that around anywhere. Let's say our chord progression is an A to a G to a D, back to an A, right? Well, if we follow that with our thumb on our low E string, going from an A to a G to a D, I can play those chords and basically play a melody around them. If I want to add more to that, it's a really kind of a cool little flair that you can add in. It's almost like chicken picking country, but you can use it anywhere. So that's something that's really cool about using your fingers. Something that always feels, I don't know, maybe a little bit more off of center, whereas you could play a lick, right? You could play this lick, and that's cool, but what if I added that low A string on there? That could be something that basically gives you a little bit fresh flair on licks that you're already doing. And all that I'm thinking there is, of course, I'm using my thumb and my index, but if you're a pick player, you could be using your pick and your middle. So that's something that's really kind of near and dear to my heart, is getting more out of the guitar as being a singular guitar player. Another thing that I was going to say that I use a lot in this new single, Threw Me to the Wolves, alongside basically everything I do, is touch, really working on my touch. It's almost as if playing the guitar, and especially the style that I love to play, which is obviously the blues rock, anything that has feel in it like that, you really need to sit and work with your bends and your vibrato. So something I would suggest to everyone that's watching, go back, reinvest some more time. Even if you're an ultimate rocker, go back and invest more time, because it's worth it. It's really worth it to work on your bending, control, your vibrato, the length, the speed. Those are the things I like to think about a lot. So we got a question that came in. Luke is asking, are some types of guitars better for playing without a pick? Great question. Honestly, it's a personal preference, right? A lot of players would think, oh, you're a fingerstyle player, you're going to play an acoustic guitar. But clearly, I've been doing it on electric, and what I've found is the only big differences for me about certain guitars to play is basically how they're set up. So the one thing that I crave when I'm playing guitar, I need a guitar that has a setup that's not too high, because I need that snap back there. Getting this. There's almost this percussive snap off of the frets that I really like. Now, the one thing that you will have to get used to, regardless if you get a Les Paul, whatever you get, you're going to have to kind of be nimble with your fingers, because it's very simple to think, oh, I'm going to have to move them a lot. But really, when I'm playing fingerstyle, you can see, even if I play something a little more fast, my hand really isn't moving. It's very stationary, but it's like the movement is very, very small. So what I would suggest when you start to play fingerstyle, remember, you're not going to be doing Pete Townsend windmills all the time. You're really going to be honing in on getting that fingerstyle to sit and to basically feel as if it's just teetering off the strings. So, for instance, playing Threw Me to the Wolves, that rhythm, when I'm sitting there going, it's almost as if I'm trying to basically, it's a kind of a give and take. It's like I'm bouncing off the strings. That's a good way to look at it. You're almost bouncing. So I would suggest trying all different types of guitars. And when you know, you know. One of the big things I will say, pickup height. Now, I'm getting really nerdy, but when you're playing with your fingers, most of the time, remember, your fingers are going to be under. And that's why I love Gold Glory and Old Glory. There's nothing in the way here, you know. And when I was coming up as a fingerstyle player, I always used to get so mad if there was a pickup too high, because I couldn't get any leverage on the strings. So with this guitar, you know, call Long and McQuaid, you get you a Gold Glory, you're going to be rocking, because you got all that space under the strings. That is one thing. And clearly, P90 pickups, they sit where they sit. You can't really adjust those. But this thing's set up great. It's got, I would say, almost a little less than a ½ inch between the strings. Like I said, I don't use a very high action, but the action has to have intent with enough percussiveness to it. All right, we have Tone Pilots asking, what do I think of stainless steel frets? Awesome question. I like them. I've never owned a guitar with stainless steel frets. I'm of the philosophy that if it ain't broke, I don't fix it. So like the only times I've gotten a fret job is when I've literally worn through the frets. And then I'm so attached to the guitar that I will say, oh, I'm just going to get the same exact frets that were on it. So, and just for anyone that's watching, when I'm playing this Epiphone, this guitar is 100% stock. This Gold Glory, my Old Glory, these guitars are 100% stock. And there's something to be said about that because these, I get them right as you would off the shelf at Long & McQuaid. There's no trickery to them. And with a good setup, they're rocking. So stainless steel frets to me have always been great because I feel like they're the ultimate, they can handle the most abuse, right? Like stainless steel feels like I can basically play them till the end of time. Like I said, I've never owned a guitar with them, so I don't truly know like a night after night. Like let's say if I was on a tour, I wouldn't know because I'm so used to the old school, just the standard. And what I have noticed, though, is I don't like huge frets. I don't like crazy big frets. I've had some guitars with, like, Dunlop 6100, like, fret wire, like the Stevie Ray Vaughan style, and it's almost too big. It almost takes over the playing. Like, I like frets. No, I'm getting put on the spot. I don't know the exact. If you really want to know, DM me. I'll tell you after we get off the call. But I like frets that you can almost feel the fretboard under. So when I bend, I can feel like the wood of the fretboard right underneath them. There's something really, really cool about, now, this is a whole nother thing, and I feel like I could talk like for hours about it. As players, I feel like we always tend to go for the most, what's the right word? The most easiest playing setups where the guitar, you know, oh, this guitar plays like butter, it plays itself. Sometimes what I find is when there's a guitar that's set up great, it's standard, there's nothing too crazy about it. There's something about when you have to like fight it a little bit that makes your playing a little bit more exciting. It makes, for me personally, there's been times where I've played guitars that were beautiful and I literally held them and I was like, oh wow, like this thing, it feels like, it's like a Cadillac, right? It's like, it feels so good. But when I play them on stage or when I'm playing them in a session, it's almost like I'm not really working hard enough. Now that's like a whole different philosophy. But the one thing that I really like, and I set up with my Les Pauls, is I like them to, like I said, have a low action, but there's still enough that when I play them, it's almost like I'm fighting the guitar. It's almost like there's a friendly fight happening because I'm trying to control it, right? Now, this guitar isn't set up perfect, but it has enough that I can really move around it, but I'm fighting it a little bit. So, yet again, a long-winded answer, Tone Pilot. Stainless steel frets, awesome. And if they work for you, that's great. I've just never owned a guitar that had them on it. I bet you I would love them if I did, but I just got standard. Whatever came on Gold Glory, Old Glory, these guitars, that's what I use. So, cheers. And going on, if anyone has any more questions, get back to it. Kevin MacLeod says, the Empress Tape Echo is the best, made in Canada. Awesome. Okay, I got to check it out. Made in Canada. Very, very cool. Very cool. Any other questions? Fire them over. So, back to what I was saying. Playing. Vibrato. There's something very special about working on your vibrato. So when it comes to Jared's tone tips, techniques, work on that feel. Work on getting that vibrato to really sit. Focus on different types if you really want a wide, fast vibrato. If you want something that's slow, almost floating over the music. And always think when you're playing, there's something, the more I play, the more I realize this too. Like, I'm still learning that when I'm playing guitar, when I'm playing with certain intent with my vibrato or bending, almost like the feel in my attack, it makes the music better. So if I need a really big wide vibrato, let's say, that's cool. But what if I need something that's a little bit more, of a tight fast? What if I want something that's very middle of the... It's very important to focus, and what I like to do and what I suggest is really work on your slow, very medium, fast vibrato, aggressive vibrato. Same goes with bending. Half step bends, whole step bends. I mean, bending 2.5. You can even go crazy. Check this out. Using those bends to your fullest potential, thinking about bending and vibrato as if you're a singing guitar player. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day. He's a Slash. He loves Slash. And he said, Jared, every time that Slash plays, when he plays, you can hear it is a guitar vocal melody. And I think that's something that's so cool that sometimes we as players might lose sight of, is actually playing melodically. And I feel like when I hone in bending, vibrato, that is the absolute for like being melodic. So focus on that a little more when you're playing, and I feel like it'll help everything. When it comes to phrasing, being a little more vocal, using call and response. If I was to say, and then maybe you want to go crazy. Really, that is, to me, the most key and the most identifiable part of being a guitarist. Being able to be heard, make yourself known by one note, one phrase, literally one lick. And I feel like that really has to come down to bending, vibrato, your tone, the tone of the amp, the touch, the feel. It's that important to me. So if you get anything out of this, work on your bending and vibrato. Get that tone right. All right, we got a few more questions coming in. Here we go. Brian is asking, where and how did you learn your music theory? Oh my goodness, that is a great question. It started that I just started to teach myself. I started, playing guitar when I was 15 years old, and I realized that early on, I had to almost learn how to spell, right? It was like I could sound things out on the guitar, but when it came to learning, it was almost as if theory was my key to learn how to spell things and to do it my own way. So I started very simply. I just started to learn the guitar fretboard. Then it became learning chords and how they're related to each other. Then, dipping my toe into scales, how they're related to the chords, what's the circle of fifths, things like that I could kind of start wrapping my head around. And basically, it all came to a head when I was about 17 years old. I actually had the chance to audition to go to Berklee College of Music in Boston. And I remember that I took it very seriously. So my music theory level from the age of 16 to 17 probably jumped more than any time in my life because I was so gung-ho about it. So I got accepted to go to Berklee. And when I got there, it was all theory. And I was learning how to play keyboards. I was learning more advanced, theory as applied to like jazz, theory, classical. And I was trying to put that in with my playing, but at heart, I'm just a kid who wants to play guitar. So it all started to come from there. But the one thing I would say with theory is make sure that when you're learning it, you can apply it right away. That was the big thing for me. I felt like I started learning so much theory that I didn't have anywhere to go with it. I hope that makes sense. But I would sit there and it started to backfire, because what's great is if someone said, okay, Jared, we're going to jam. And they go, we're going to play A minor to a G to a C major chord. Okay, cool. I can think in my head, okay, A minor, okay, to a G to a C major. So we have, okay, cool. We can play that. And I think, okay, what scales will I use? How am I going to get this out? I'm going to listen to what everyone else is playing. What can I add? How can I make this better? What ended up happening was I started to think in my head, oh man, I almost got nervous. It was like, well, what if I play G over the A minor and G? And I could probably play a little bit of G over that C chord because C is the fourth of G. So I started to get crazy. So all I would like to say to you is when you're learning theory, take it piece by piece. Literally, don't eat the whole pizza in one gulp because it never goes well. Take it piece by piece. So when you say, okay, Jared, we're going to jam over A minor. And I say, okay, cool. So we're playing over A minor. Well, what if I want to add, like, let's say the blue note? Okay, well, how do I find the blue note? Well, I know it's right here. It's an E flat. Okay, cool. So learning where those notes are, how they relate to actually the instrument. I would say really work on that with music theory. And for me, I kind of almost had to put it in its own piece of my brain, because when I played, there were certain times that I didn't want to just think about theory. It was almost like I just wanted to see where the music would take me. Almost like if an artist was just like, I am not putting the exact amount of color I need for this. I'm just going to see what this does. And that's a really beautiful thing too. So while you're playing, make sure that you're using your head and you're saying to yourself, okay, cool, this is how this relates to this. But use it as a guideline. Don't use it as a law. Because some of the coolest sounds ever, I have to say, are when someone plays the complete wrong thing over a chord, because it literally hits you so hard that you'll never forget it. I remember there was a time I was playing it was like an A major 7 chord, right? And for some reason, I thought it'd be a good idea to hit, which is a flat third, which has nothing to do with... And then I bent into it. So remember, there's certain things that you can do that are going to make your theory pop out and you can use it in your playing, but always take it piece by piece. All right, we got some more questions coming in. What string gauge do I play to bend so easily? Oh, thank you for that, because honestly, sometimes I think to myself, I'm not a good bender. But thank you for saying that. But I use DRs. I'm sure Long & McQuade sells DRs. Yep. So I use DRs. They're called Veritas. These strings that I have on Old Glory and Gold Glory are 10 to 52s, the Veritas. So what I like about the 10 to 52s is they're pretty stout for when I'm playing rhythm. They have a certain kind of edge to them that, they have definition. And that's something that's really good for me when I'm playing in the trio, especially because being the only guitar player, I don't want strings that are too easy where when I'm playing them, they kind of just get lost in the mix. I feel like the 52 has a nice punchy bottom on these low strings. And then when I go up top, I can really focus on getting a nice kind of, well, basically, it's not effortless, but there's enough to that where I can just focus on what I'm playing musically. I used to play 11s, and I found that I started to think about the strings and think about the guitar more than playing music. And then the same with 9s. Like the 9s were too light. So a 10 to 52 for me feels like the perfect gauge. And the reason I like the DR Veritas, and this is not an ad, this is serious. These strings, I used to try coated strings all the time, and I hated them, but I wanted them to last longer, especially on tour. So the DR strings, what I like about them is they have a coated core, right? So underneath the traditional wind is the coating, and it seriously helps these things last longer. There were times when I would be on tour, I would play 5 shows with the same set of strings. And that's a lot when you're really going wild. And I'm playing hard on these strings. I could do five shows. And truth be told, maybe it'll happen during this live stream now that I'm jinxing myself. I've never broken a DR string. Never, ever. Not even at the saddle. There's something about these strings that I can bend. And they just sound great. Now, maybe I will break one now that I just jinxed myself. But I love these DR strings. They're very, very cool. They're very easy. Like, there's just so much I like about them. Every time I put them on, it's almost like I forget they're there, and that's a good thing. It's a really good thing. Okay, let's see. Gilmore Johnson is, what other techniques do I use to make my soloing melodic? Well, I was going to talk about that. Thank you for bringing that up. So, not to go back to the song Threw Me to the Wolves that came out, but I've been talking about it all the time. So with like the solo on there, you could think to yourself, okay, cool, it's A minor, right? It starts off with a big A minor lick, literally. Straight A minor, straight blues, Stevie Ray style, David Gilmour, Gary Moore. There's certain things I like to do when I'm playing that kind of spice it up. Now, a lot of players will do this. My personal favorites are obviously guys like Gary Moore, even like, not to bring Slash again. It's almost like you take your favorite parts of different scales, the different tones that you like, the different riffs, and you kind of mix them together. So there's certain things that I like to do to spice it up and make it melodic. There's certain notes that I like to use. For instance, I guess you could say it's the 9th. In this solo, I use it a lot. Basically, fancy, the 9th is the B note. So if I'm in the key of A, it's the second note here. So let's say this right here. If I'm playing and I'm on the 15th fret of my B string, bending that up a whole step, bring it down. Milking different kind of basically half-step bends. Being able to go. There's certain phrases that I like to use to make it more melodic. All right, think about this too. Repetition really, really helps with making a melody. So even you could take something simple. You could take 3 notes. Let's go 9th fret on our B string to the 6th fret. No, that's 10th fret to the 8th fret, then the 9th on our G string. Sounds like this. What if I went like this? Now, maybe that's not the coolest thing you've ever heard, but it's stuck in your ear now. Do, 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 do. So when I'm thinking about making something more melodic, I'm thinking of using repetition. I'm thinking about using different kind of notes that'll stick out a little more in a phrase. Maybe things that aren't as common. My favorite solos, my favorite melodic things are really when a player is kind of pushing the boundaries. So that's something I like to think about too, is maybe kind of sticking out, going outside of the box, playing something that's maybe not exactly perfect. So for instance, on that Through Me to the Wolf solo, there's a whole section where I'm basically sitting there on this. Pretty nice. Now I'm going to add some of those notes like that B note I talked about. And what you'll notice too is making things melodic is, I would be a fool to not say it, chord tones. So in this solo, I'm really trying to nail chord tones. I'm thinking, going back to that other question about theory, I'm thinking, what notes could I hit that are really going to bring a really great flavor to it? Chord tones all day. Going back to it, going up, repetition. I hit this kind of lick up here. The Skinner lick, the Freebird lick. Now that lick, we've heard it a billion times, a gillion times, but when you play it and you add it with intent to certain solos, it's like all of the classic stuff. Yes, we may have heard it a million times, but it is familiar to our ears. So when you're making a melodic solo, I think a big part of that as well is adding things that the listener can just pick up on. And they say, oh yeah, no, this is perfect. Like, I know that phrase. I've heard that before. It's like a sense of familiarity, and they're comforted by it. So don't forget about that. A lot of years I spent trying to be someone that didn't play anything that you've ever heard before. You know what that means? Like I thought I was too cool for school. But in reality, what I was doing was kind of alienating myself from the audience. So instead, now I try and think more of a way that's more mindful and it connects. So I can do things that feel personal to me and more melodic in my own style. You know, maybe I go. Then I could hit a lick that people know, you know. So don't forget about that. So going back to it, being melodic, repetition, thinking about chord tones. Obviously, the tone that you have being melodic to a point of maybe hitting things a little outside of the box, and also letting your listener hear things and be comfortable with it. That's what I loved about David Gilmour. A lot of those amazing solos, we could hum them, you know, whatever it was, if it was, you know. All of those solos, you could hum them, and they weren't just blindingly fast. And, you know, I've never wanted to be like a fast player. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but of course I love shredding and the art of shredding. But there's something to be said about playing something that a listener can really be on the ride with you. That's why my biggest hero, Leslie West of Mountain, Leslie West, old school Clapton, all of that, a lot of that Hendrix stuff, like Stevie Ray, you could take a ride, you could listen, and it felt like you were part of the solo. When things get too fast and they almost get too crazy, for me, I tend to kind of teeter off or maybe lose interest. I want the solo that kind of plays with me, where it's like, I was listening today to Sitting on Top of the World, Clapton, and there's something about his solo that you could sing every single line, and it's like he gave you just enough that you were totally hooked, but you wanted more. And I think there's something so beautiful to that about music. So like the old Cream song, Sleepy Time, you know, he'd play. that's it. And then you have to wait for the next one, and he plays it a little different. There's something really, really cool about that. So think about that stuff when you're building melodic solos. Think about it. Take your time, too. Take your time. Really take the listener on an adventure more so than just a straight rocket straight to space. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. It's fun to... But sometimes it's very fun to... So think about that. Yes. Okay, we got another question here. Cole Parker, how would you compare an SG with P90s versus a humbucker for blues and classic rock? Honestly, it's just a little bit of a different voice. You know, there's been a long time debate and a long time kind of opposites of humbuckers versus P90s. And what I would like to say, my take on all of that, is it's up to the player. I have found that the SG, now when we're talking different body styles, you know, you would have to see that, you know, an SG and a Les Paul, they're totally built different, right? They're just different. They're different animals. They're different beasts. So there is going to be a lot of different tonal things like that. Today I was doing a session with a Firebird. Totally different. Mini buckers, very, very bright. There was something really crazy about that guitar that it inspired me, though. I was playing different. So it's the same with an SG. You know, the SG with the thinner body, I feel like it's a little more punchy. It has a little bit more, not thinness, but like it's a little bit more tighter. Like if I could say like a Les Paul, when you hit a chord, it's just like big. With an SG, it's a little tighter. And not that I'm thinking of only Angus Young or, you know, thinking in that way, but there is a lot of music that we can hear and we can listen to and go, okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. Because when you hear those AC/DC parts and you think about the guitar he was playing through those amps, through Marshalls, you would say, wow, that tone's super punchy. And that is that super blues kind of classic rock sound, right? Now, let's say we compare an SG with P90s versus humbuckers. That's going to be a little bit more of a different animal. So when I associate P90s with a guitar, basically what I'm thinking it's going to do is it's going to filter out any sort of niceness. So hear me out. Like a P90 is basically a straight shot. Like right now we don't have a ton of buzzing, which is great, but there's something special about a P90 where it's filterless. Like it's not trying to save anything. You're getting all of the wash of everything, but it's also a little bit more direct. So it's a little thinner. It's a little crisper. It's a little snappier. When I think about an SG with P90s, I think more about early Santana. I think a little bit more, even like, I do think a little bit more like Eric Clapton kind of Cream vibe. So what I would suggest for you is you got to try them both. And you got to try them both where you're comfortable. A lot of people, when they think about doing these, or they watch videos, I used to be a victim of it, I swear. I would watch these shootout videos, whether it was a pedal or an amp, and I would see something, I go, that's the one. That's totally the thing I need. And then I would go to, I don't have a Long and McQuaid, but I would go to a store and I would try it and I'd say, man, this is not at all what I was thinking. And it's almost like your dream is shattered. Like you're like, you know, you pick it up and you're like, and you go, wait, I thought it was going to feel a lot different, or I thought the tone was going to be a lot different. So what I would suggest is checking out gear that you can, go to Long and McQuaid, go where you can and feel comfortable with it. Sit there and really get to know it for a moment. Now, that doesn't mean just shredding mindlessly on it and trying to impress people, but actually getting to know the guitar for a second, saying, could this be something I could really bond with? Because I have plenty of friends that, you know, Joe Bonamassa included, that he's a humbucker guy. He would tell you straight up, you know, we always mess around and joke about old Les Pauls, and he sees my old Les Pauls and he goes, oh, Jared, that thing would sound so much better, or that you should put humbuckers in it. And I'm like, dude, you're crazy, you know? But to him, he feels really comfortable playing humbucker Les Pauls. You know, he has obviously amazing tone with the P90s, but they just don't feel right. So I think there's something to be said about that really at the end of the day, it is a personal choice. But one last comment. The humbuckers are going to be a lot easier when you're playing gigs, when you're doing sessions. The one thing I notice all the time from P90 guitars is you really got to be fast on. I remember a friend of mine, Doug Aldrich, he said, man, you got to be like a gunslinger on the volume knob, because it's like you could play something, you got to turn it off, you know? Off. So it's almost like you're doing a card trick, because you don't want that buzz hanging out. And there's been so many times, I can't even tell you, I can't even count how many times I will be walking into a venue to play a show. And the first thing I do when I plug my guitar in, I don't even play. I just turn up the volume knob, because that's going to tell me exactly what I need to know as far as, okay, is the club grounded? You know, it might just, or is it clean power? Do I need to figure out, do I need to try and get a ground lift? That's one thing about humbuckers that is a very, very, hence why most guitars and guitarists use them, is because you don't have to really worry about that. But I got to say, with P90s, there's just something special that they do that, to me, it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier, where it makes you kind of fight the guitar. It makes you play a little different. And that's something that I love about them. So check them both out. Go to Long & McQuaid. Here's what you do. You go buy both of them, and then you just keep both of them. No, I'm just kidding. But any other questions? Anyone got any questions? Fire them off. Otherwise, I was going to say a few other cool things. Something that's really cool that I wanted to share that just came in the mail today. These came out. This is a cool. It's the Blackstar Fly 3. It's the JJN edition. So this is the little mini amp that is basically the Fly practice amp that you can get, but it's based on the color scheme, everything on my JJN 20. So very, very cool. Check that out. It just came out today. Now, it's not out yet, but we just announced it today. So that's something really cool. Otherwise, if you guys want to check out that song with Bonamassa, that is streaming, Threw Me to the Wolves. Of course, the tour dates. I don't know if anyone wants to come down from Canada, come meet up with me. We can shred. We can talk more about guitars at the tour dates, but those dates are all online. Yeah, my ArtistWorks course, if you want to dig in a little bit deeper, that's there. And honestly, if anyone has any other questions, shoot them over. Otherwise, I think I'm just going to jam a little bit for you guys, and we'll keep it going here. right, guys, we got a few more questions. Come on here. Let's see what we got. So, Dedrick, what do you think about Gretsch semi-hollow bodies? Dedrick, I have an amazing story for you. So when I was 17 years old, I went on a field trip with my art class in high school, right? We went to my art teacher's grandfather's cabin, way in so I grew up in Wisconsin, so I'm not that far from Canada. Give me a break. So we are at his cabin, and we're just hanging out, and we're in there's like a little crawl space basement. And me and my friend are like, what's down there? We were like trying to scare everyone. And I was like, I'm going to go look down there. And lo and behold, I walk down there, and there's a ton of old stuff. What do I see against the wall? Guitar case. I went, what is that? So of course I pull it out. It's a 1962 Gretsch 6120 Chet Atkins hollow body. I pull out the guitar, and my art teacher goes, oh yeah, that was my grandfather's guitar. And I'm like, wow. The thing was in a basement, so it had some damage to it. But she said, why don't you take it home and you can see if you can get it running? And still have the guitar. Love it. It's such a cool instrument. It has a lot of issues, to say the least. But it had been in a basement for about 40 years. So the binding, everything was basically coming off it. But what do I think of those guitars? I think they're super cool. And what I think is cool about them is there's such like kind of a lineage. So for me, I am, and I think I always will be, just a Gibson guy through and through, because I love that. That's the sound I associate. But there's a lineage with Gretsch that's super cool that dates back. You know, I don't even know how old the company is. I'm not going to sit here and try and lie to you. But I just think it's awesome because I love Chet Atkins. I love rockabilly. I love the sound of Gretsch guitars. I think they sound amazing. Don't know if I would sound amazing on them, but I love the sound of them. So I think they're super cool. And if that's what makes you inspired, that's awesome. One of my great friends, he actually passed away last year. Go check out his band. It was called Wolfjaw. They're from the UK, and he played rock and roll on those Gretsch semi-hollows, but he played like fuzzed out rock and roll, and it was super cool. Go check out Wolfjaw. They had a lot of really cool sounds, and he got them all through those crazy Filtertron pickups, which to me was always weird, because I was like, man, I'll go P90s, but I'm not going any weirder than that, dude. But Nathan Gray says, thoughts on tubes going out? Well, yeah, I've had a lot of bad nightmares with that, man. Quick story time with me is we were playing our biggest festival. This would have been in 2019. Our biggest festival to date. We were in Spain, and we were playing. It was called the Escena Rock Fest. The headliner was The Who, and we were on probably it was like 3:00 in the afternoon, of course. But we were on stage, and we were borrowing gear. Right? They had backline, and I remember they had a bunch of stuff that like it looked like it had been around forever. We plugged it in for sound check, and it was like a 100-watt amp. I plugged it in, put a distortion pedal, a tube screamer in front of it, and I was like, okay, this will work. I'll be good. And next thing you know, we go on for our set. We're all excited. Flip on the amp. I hit a big A chord. Boom. And all of a sudden you just hear, and I look back at the amp, and I'm like, oh no. And I don't have another amp on me. So that's kind of the price you got to pay when you're using gear that's not yours. Especially that's tube. You just don't know how much that stuff's been like banged around. It's kind of like an old car. I love old cars. But if someone passes you the keys to an old Nova and they said, here, man, go crazy, and you say, okay, cool, I'm about to take it on the freeway and turn it up. It's kind of like an old tube amp. You don't know how long that thing's been sitting. You don't know the last time it's been serviced. You don't know if a wheel's going to fall off or it's going to start on fire. It's just the way it kind of goes. You're almost kind of rolling the dice with tube stuff. especially stuff that's not yours. So I think I'll always play tube amps, no doubt, because there is a quality to them that I associate obviously with my favorite records and my favorite players. But when I play them, and especially when I'm playing them at an appropriate volume that's pretty loud, there's something special that happens. Like you get that really cool harmonic thing from the tubes, the speakers start crying. There's this it's kind of this really, really cool saturation effect that happens. And I love them, but I did hear as well that there's a lot of tubes that are going to start, it's going to be harder to get tubes now. So who knows what's going to happen, man. I might just have to plug into this thing and just see what happens. No, I'm just kidding. And it's just, it's very cool to play tube amps, but you just have to make sure that you keep your stuff serviced, because I think more than anything, that's where it'll go wrong. And if it says don't put the amp on its side, don't do it. I've had a problem with that. I've been shocked by tube amps, all this stuff, man. So I love them, but I think they might be trying to kill me too. A few other questions. Jeff is saying, Jared, do you have any preferences to a model of P90 pickups? I'm wanting to upgrade my Gibson Les Paul double cut. Hey, Jeff, thank you for tuning in, man. Okay, my preference, I've tried a bunch of different stuff, and the one that's always been tried and true for me is if there's nothing wrong with it, usually I leave them alone, but if I want to upgrade something, I'll just put in one of the Seymour Duncan Antiquity pickups, because here's my reasoning. Every time I've played one, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's the exact sound of a P90 that I want. It has all of like the character, all the definition, but it doesn't have the price tag of something that's like boutique, because sometimes, and what I think's great about a P90 is a lot of manufacturers moved on. So the P90 came out, and then of course they wanted to upgrade it, so they went to a humbucker. So they went to like a PAF, right? So the P90s didn't get messed with that much. And I think there's something to be said about that, because when it didn't get messed with, they're still working on that original kind of format. Seymour Duncan Antiquity, it's like I get all the tones I want out of it. It's a really good price point, and it's a really easy upgrade. A P90 pickup is an easy one. It should be easy, and I think that Seymour Duncan nailed it. And with my guitars, they have Duncans. They have an equivalent to that Antiquity, USA made, in these Epiphones, which I think is amazing. It's got the Seymour Duncan, the Duncan of USA. It's got CTS pots for the volume and tone. So it's kind of like when you're working with stuff like that, you already are basically upgraded, but from there it's more of a, like I said, it's a personal, kind of a personal situation where you say to yourself, okay, is this voiced right for me? Because yet again, maybe if you want to upgrade your P90, you could get something that is maybe a little bit hotter. You want a little bit more output. So that's something that you could figure out. Or if it's something that even is, as simple as a lot of times on P90s, they're not matched up. A lot of times I find that the neck pickup is a lot louder, and it kind of outshines the bridge. So what I tend to do a lot in guitars is I'll swap for a high output Antiquity, and that'll usually cure my problem. So I'll go with Seymour Duncan's, man. And yeah, that's the big one for me. All right, we'll take another question. Diedrich says, do you play more instruments than just the guitar? To be honest, one thing that I love to do, which is kind of cheating, but on a lot of my records and a lot of the music I record, I play the bass. I love to play bass guitar. I kind of play it with this fingerstyle that I have, though. So maybe I'm kind of cheating. I think bass players would get mad at me. But I love to play bass. I originally wanted to be a drummer. Didn't work out. Drums were too loud at my house, and my dad was basically like, if you're going to play, it needs to have a volume knob that we can turn it down. So, like, I would say a little bit of drums, but to be honest, bass guitar, it would be the only other thing. And, of course, singing. So that's really, that's where I kind of set my sights. And it's another thing, I would always try and do other stuff, but I knew in my heart that I wanted to be a guitar player. So guitar and singing always took kind of the time priority. I used to start messing around with the drums, and then I'd say to myself, man, you're not going to be a drummer. Just play the guitar, just work on that, try and put all my energy into that. So that's really what I did. And now I'm glad I did that because, you know, this is really where I've found my voice, is with the guitar. But I listen to a lot of other instruments, and I think that that's something that really helps out a lot. I love the sounds of, so many different things. Of course, piano and organ, but also like steel guitar. I love the sound of a harmonica. I love the sound of a sitar. There's so many different things that I think you can really hone in on and get influence and style from that you can put into your guitar playing. Even like little techniques, whether it's a, or even just, you know, a, all right, we got another question. If you want to ask a question, fire them off, because I've already been talking to you guys for an hour and 20 minutes. So if you have any other questions, fire them off. Otherwise, I'm going to go be eating some dinner here soon. So here we go. Dedrick is asking, yep, do I play more instruments than just a guitar? We got that one. And then J Rev says, great communicator. Question, I have missed this, but did you transition from the other genres before blues? Which ones? And what were the challenges and keys to that journey? Thanks, J Rev. So here's my whole kind of upbringing. Starting off with my parents, they were always listening to classic rock. My dad was really into everything from Mountain and Hendrix and Cream to Bob Dylan. My mom was a little bit more into the 50s stuff. I started hearing country music at an early age. Patsy Cline, Hank Williams, stuff like that. So I was hearing all of that. But also I was listening to, you know, I was born in 1989. So the first memories I have of hearing modern music was hearing grunge. It was hearing Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Mad Season, Silverchair. It was hearing Stone Temple Pilots, stuff like that. So I liked that too. So when I started to play the guitar, I didn't really kind of think to myself, oh man, I'm trying a different genre. I'm trying this. I remember the first riff I ever learned was Electric Funeral by Black Sabbath. I remember listening to the Black Sabbath stuff and going, oh man, this is so cool. This is so heavy, but I didn't really associate it like I was going to play metal guitar. And then I remember hearing Man in the Box, Purple Haze, Voodoo Child, Stevie Ray Vaughan, stuff like that. And it just kind of all blended together. So I was kind of getting it from all angles and just getting excited about the guitar in general. When I first started, the first time I'd ever played on stage, it was at a blues jam. So that's when the blues thing really hit me, because I was able to do that in real time. My mom took me to a blues jam, and I went from never being on stage, never thinking about being on stage, to playing a shuffle and being part and trying to think of what is this music, because I was hearing all of the influence from the music I was already listening to, whether it was Zeppelin or Hendrix or even a lot of that grunge stuff. I would hear those bluesy tones, but then I was hearing blues, and it was like, oh man, this is something different. So when I was 15-ish, I got obsessed with learning blues. I got obsessed with basically how do these people play like this, and what is this language? And then what ended up happening is I was obsessed with the blues for many years. I moved to Los Angeles, and I wanted to start my own band and write my own songs and kind of figure out my own way. And the best thing I could do was I could take all that cool blues influence, but also kind of inject it with what I grew up listening to. And what also got me excited was kind of putting some punch behind it. That's when I started to get heavy into Mountain, into all of the classic stuff, but also, all that grunge stuff again. And even, I listened to so many different things, from, the heavy stuff to old country stuff to jazz to cool psychedelic stuff. So in my brain, good music's good music, however you cut it. So for me, the blues will always be like my roots and my source of inspiration, but taking them and just kind of seeing where they go with my imagination. So I hope that makes sense. All right, we got another question here. Jeff saying, what tips do you have for someone wanting to learn fingerstyle picking like yours? The first tip I would have for you is to really just think about the mechanics of what you're doing. So for me, my thumb always goes down, okay? My thumb is my downstroke. My index finger, my middle finger, and my ring finger are my upstrokes, okay? So think in your mind that we want to say, okay, how are we going to do this? What are the mechanics? Because it's almost like with a pick where it's like down, up, down, up. So when you're playing, really be kind of, mindful that I would sit there for hours and I would just take my thumb on an open E string and just hit it, trying to feel that. And then I would take my index finger and go up. And you can try it with your middle finger. You can hear the different sound there. And I would sit and go through all of the strings and do this. And it's almost as if the first thing you want to think about is getting out of your mind the fact that you're not using a pick or you're not doing something weird. Then it's almost familiarizing yourself with the tension of the strings, because that's a big thing I've never heard anyone talk about, but it's so important, is how hard do we pick the strings? How much tension do I need to actually play? That's something that really is very important. And like I said, I've never heard anyone really talk about it. So take things as simple as a basic chord. You could take an E chord, right? And you can just go down with your thumb, go up with your index. And you can kind of make your way around feeling how that feels, the tension, basically just starting to get your fingers into that. And then what I would kind of say is just start experimenting, playing with different riffs, different licks, and seeing how they feel using your fingers. And always go for what feels kind of natural. The one for me that I learned the hard way was I started trying to use my fingernails. And that really messed me up. Like, really messed me up. It was almost as if when I used my fingernails, I could not win because I would just be breaking them. So what I found is I use the corners of my fingers, just basically like the corners have developed a callus that's almost right in between like a nail style and a pick. So I really focus on that. And you're going to get blisters. You're going to be ripping that skin up, but just keep with it. So start there. And also, if you really want to dig into it, you could check out my ArtistWorks course. Man, I go deep into the fingerstyle stuff. So check that out if you're interested. All right, I'm doing one more question. I'm getting out of here. Susan Litchin is saying, I play acoustic and am transitioning to electric. I also play with my fingers. The picking is fine, but how do you do chords without a pick? Okay, so there's a few different ways that you could think about it. Thanks for the question, Susan. One of the ways that you could do it is simple. You could literally use your thumb as a downstroke, right? Let's say we have an A chord. We can use our thumb going down. Or we could use our index as an upstroke. So you could think to yourself, thumb down, index up. Or there's another way, it's kind of a cool technique. Think to yourself, if we're going to play an E chord, we could do our low E, our A string, and our D string. Now you can take your fingertips of your thumb, index, and middle, and just play those three, put them underneath, and you can pull up on them. Pulling up at the same time. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but the one thing I would suggest is pull out a metronome and practice all three of those until they start to feel more natural. The one thing that you're going to find with this fingerstyle stuff, especially with an electric, is it's so touch sensitive. So you really have to kind of gauge yourself for how much pressure do I need? How hard do I strike the strings down? How hard do I pull up on them? It's all things that are very kind of personal. Like you're going to have to figure that out just by trial and error. But it's very rewarding when you figure them out, and it's really, really fun. I would suggest as well, think about what size strings are on your electric. Not too heavy, but also not too light. So think about that. And I think that's going to be it. I think we got some good questions down. I'm so happy that I got to hang out with everyone. I want to thank Long and McQuaid for having me. Sitting here in my guitar room at my house, getting to hang out and jam with you guys. I hope that you found some good tips and maybe have a little bit more insight and a little bit more, I don't know, something that you could add to your playing, or maybe go check out a Gold Glory. Of course, I'm going to thank Gibson and Epiphone and all of my sponsors. Go check out my new song with Joe Bonamassa, Threw Me to the Wolves. That's out, my ArtistWorks course. There's a ton of cool things happening. If you're going to come to America, come see me with Zach Wilde and Nita Strauss the end of next month. That's going to all kick off. It's going to be a ton of fun. So I just want to thank you guys. I'll do a little shred jam out. I'm going to turn this pedal up. I hope it doesn't make everyone go crazy, but I'm going to turn it up. Let's see if it helps. Uh-oh. Thank you. I'll see you guys later. Thank you, guys. See you next time. Cheers, everyone. Happy shredding.
Long and McQuaid, where the music begins.